Welcome everyone to our RPA brown bag session. Leo has prepared a very interesting presentation on robotic process automation. We'll walk you through what it's about and give you some examples, identify some use cases, and also we need some of your help as well. So as we go through the presentation, we'll expand on the details, and we also have a surprise demo at the end, so which will be very interesting. So to kick things off, I'll hand it off to Leo.
Good to be back. So thank you all for coming for our first brown bag session. So first of our many to come. Our first topic is about robotic process automation. So how many of you have any idea about what RPA is besides the people that I've talked to? Gloria and Michelle? Zero. Oh, zero. So I guess I assume like the rest doesn't have any idea of what robotic process automation. Don't worry, we'll debunk it because I too had no idea what RPA was. So this is our contents. We're going to have an introduction to RPA. What are the types of RPA? RPA with cognitive intelligence, which is / machine learning and artificial intelligence. What are the examples of RPA? And then we're going to discuss what are the major enterprise vendors that are being used in the government right now. And then pyramids plan for RPA. And then we're going to call out for use cases because we need your help to brainstorm and just have some more ideas that we can probably submit or do more research. How to submit use cases, and then continue the conversation in Slack, and then quick demo of the RPA. So you better not be hungry in the middle because then the demo will be at the last. So introduction to RPA. So first thing I've heard about RPA was when Rajiv mentioned it. RPA is really originally manufactured or like coined in like manufacturing. I don't know who came up with the term and brought it to the software industry, but to me, when I first heard it, is like, why isn't anything that is just like a custom software development is an automation already, or it's a robot that's already running. But what enterprise RPA means in this scenario is different, and the benefits for the RPA is very different, depending on the stakeholders that you're dealing with, and they want to, for example, save time on like development, and they need to like deploy the solution right away without having to do any process change, then RPA is like a good example or like an approach to sell to the customers, because again, the benefit can outweigh the custom software development offers, which I'll cover more later. RPA in general is like, it's not replacing humans at all. It's just complementing all the human tasks. So what are those? So those are like highly repetitive, high frequency, and high volume, and mostly done by a human person. And how do they do it? Normally, a service worker would actually do it through the presentation layer, so through the user interface. So here are the possible RPA terms that you might hear from like other people or articles. So back office is like, it's a process that's mostly not facing the customer. So anything internal stuff like HR or IT, those are back. And front office, obviously, like dealing with the customer service. So it's say for SEC, someone is submitting claims or like submitting a form, and then they want to ask someone to say, hey, what kind of form, or like have a frequently asked question. RPA can automatically like help that one by solving or creating bots, for example, and then it would create like a knowledge base and a cute question and answer system that's available to the service or user. Shared service is basically, for example, one organization want to merge their finance and accounting. If there's a shared service, they can just combine it. So now they would have like a central repository where they can just collaborate with that central repository. Swivel chair is it's a process where you take an input and then you place it into like multiple systems such as ERP or CRM or any other legacy systems. RDA is an acronym that is mentioned, so it means like robotic desktop automation. RDA is like, there's different types of RDA. One is like attended one, and then the other one is unattended. So normally if you have an RPA bot, some of the stakeholders are like, oh wow, I don't want any process change. I want to be confident still on like, if the bot does this, I want to make sure or double check that it's actually putting the right values. So for example, for Cameron, it's like the HR onboarding. She want to put all the employee information in ADP or like the background check website. And then that's also repetitive. What the robot can do is like, it would automate the inputting of all the forms. And then there would be like a pause in between where it's like, okay, can you double check, is my input correct? If not, then you can modify it. And then if it is, then you can go continue with the process. And then what's a typical RPA solution theme? Normally it's just the same as what we're used to, which is like software development. Just replace software developers or software tester as like RPA. That's what it is. So there's 3 approaches when it comes to automating. The first one is like, since computers were born, macros and scripting has already been there. But normally it's there, depending on the graph, where we can see like the business people can automate it using Excel, and then how simple the task is. And then you can see at the end of the spectrum of the graph is like how complex or more important it is in the organization. And then the other one is like how technical do you need to be in order to come up with an approach. Custom software development is always like API to API. So this is what we're always used to do, but this is really time consuming, and a lot of like development gets like a lot of bugs and a lot of like maintenance and stuff like that you can reduce with just RPA, because again, developing an RPA solution is just much faster, but there's always strengths and weaknesses between that, but I'll probably tell that more later. So where is the enterprise RPA? So RPA that they envision that they're trying to sell to the government is like, we want our business people to also have components that they can use, and then they can upload it to an IDE or like an editor, and then they can collaborate it with their own RPA developers for more complex stuff. And that's, again, the RPA is mostly just dealing with the presentation or user interface. They're not going through the back channel. So this is a good, perfect example for legacy systems. So if you have a legacy system that nobody knows how the API works, no documentation at all, but then people know how to use it through the UI, then we can automate those tasks to like mimic what the actual person is doing. So no process change, it's just delegating the work to the robot and then have other people focus on more important stuff. I missed something.
So just to add to what Leo was mentioning, so that's the sweet spot, right? So when you look at an enterprise organization, they have a lot of different systems and applications, very well established. For them to introduce a process automation that involves multiple systems, multiple applications, it requires coordination, it requires a whole exercise of SDLC, and would be a much larger initiative. If that particular use case is a fairly low-hanging fruit, it could be a candidate for robotic process automation, because it may just involve integrating a bunch of user interfaces. It may be a short-lived process automation because they might be incorporating some downstream improvements to the underlying application itself. And so robotic process automation occupies a certain space in the industry where you have sufficient frequency of human involvement and deeper human involvement. And then you want to be able to automate that so that you can get a quick saving. So return on investment becomes very apparent because you're able to measure how much time, human hours you're saving through the RPA model. And so, this works really well for large enterprises that have established applications where robotic process automation can bring in that incremental automation capability to save human hours.
So there's like, again, there's a strengths. We've been focusing on the strengths of the RPA, but we're gonna cover some of the weaknesses. So where we are in like 2 years ago for the RPA, where they're marketing it, is the current one where robots are doing it, mimicking an actual thing. Where the RPA is heading right now is obviously going to be like, they call it cognitive intelligence or smarter RPA. Those are like mixed with like machine learning stuff and artificial intelligence. And this is a perfect example of like applying all the machine learning algorithms that has been researched and developed for the past few years and replace it with an actual robot. So for example, in SEC, I've heard that one of their workers actually goes to like 10th floor and then pick up the papers and then scan it, go to the 5th floor, and then they have to like sort it out or classify each so that different organization unit will take it and then they just process it. So what would the RPA would do instead is like, we can just implement a solution where it's like someone gets an OCR of the PDF form in a hard copy and then upload it, have a machine learning algorithm that classifies what kind of forms it is, and then have a business flow where it's like which organization should it be sent to. So and some of it are also like information extraction, such as like I have like a summary of notes and what are the keywords in this one. So those are like some of the stuff. But in my opinion is like, I see the future would be like, then we're gonna get rid of the presentation layer that we've been dealing with, which is like creating the forms, creating data tables, creating whatever, right? Everything will just gonna be in the chatbot and everything will be natural language processing because a user can just obviously naturally talk to a bot saying like, I want to add something, like I want to submit this form, and then it would guide you through it without having to manually click on every other buttons in the system. Examples of RPA. So according to like Deloitte, they've actually developed an RPA in NASA, and they've developed a shared service, or they develop an RPA for their shared service, which is like automating their HR processes stuff. And according to them, they've been doing well with that, and they save time without having to have like a custom software development and have like deploy it in like say at least a year. There are different typical use cases, which is like finance, human resource, supply chain, and IT operations. So these are mostly like back office stuff, right? Anything that a human is always doing through the UI, and it's been repetitive, high volume, or like massive amount, we can just create an RPA solution for that, and then it's gonna save you time. So these are the major RPA vendors: Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, Pega, and UiPath. According to my research, it's mostly like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism is mostly used. I haven't really used or heard of Pega. And then some of the things that I've discovered while developing, researching RPA is like most of the organization are already moving towards Office 365. And if one of the stakeholders are thinking of like, why can you come up with an RPA solution for us? My response would be like, do you have Office 365? And if so, do you have any, if your organization is tightly coupled with like the Microsoft products, Microsoft already offers this tools, which is Microsoft Flow, and Microsoft Power Apps. So these are automating tasks and then communicating in between services without having to have an actual technical person. So Microsoft Flow is basically automating some third-party services, or they've already built stuff. So a business user can actually create their own flow. And then Power Apps is like a business user can also create a sample app, or not a sample app, like an actual application that they want to share. So for example, if Chuck, for example, wants to create like a contract system right away, and he can develop it within hours and just say, all right, say for example, list of contracts. That's a bad example, but you get the point.
Keep going.
I don't want to throw idea.
He has to develop it.
Exactly.
Yes.
I thought this was Microsoft. I thought it was an example more of a business process automation.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure whether there's any bot involved here. I mean, would you call it RPA or is it just?
I would call it RPA for the Microsoft Flow.
Yes, that's what.
Because yeah, again, this is just like a tool for like creating an RPA, because you can create a service like a Microsoft Flow and then a Power Apps, and then integrate it with a simple RPA just to connect some of the stuff that is not available for this one.
So that's an interesting question. One of the things that I've noticed in the industry is a lot of the BPM vendors, right? Pega is a BPM vendor. Appian and a few other BPM tool makers have started creating RPA capabilities to their stack. Because in a typical RPA, I mean, you'll see an example in the demo. You can actually, you need a canvas, a design tool where you can say, okay, this is the UI that I'm going to read some data, and this is the other UI where I'm going to populate some data, and this is where I'm going to do some additional action. So there is an effort involved for the RPA designer / developer to design that sequence flow. And so they're using, a lot of these BPM vendors have that design canvas capability as part of the business process automation. So they are leveraging some of the existing capabilities and then trying to address that RPA angle with sufficient integration with UI tools and other email and other exchanges so that they're able to then implement RPA capabilities as part of their tool stack. So it's a very easy segue for an existing BPM vendor platform. So you'll find those known terms and say, oh, you know, that's a BPM vendor. They're not an RPA vendor, right? They didn't start off as an RPA firm. So, yeah.
These UIs have to be all within one application, or they can be multiple applications?
Multiple applications. Yeah.
Because one issue ICE has is they have to log into multiple.
Right. That's the whole point, right? So the whole point of the challenge was if it's all in one application, then you can make the argument that that's a feature enhancement for that application. The HR use case that Deloitte pointed out is a very, very good example because even for us, we have to deal with maybe 4 or 5 different, you know, you have ADP, you have background check, you have a number of systems, especially a small business, when you don't have everything integrated, you have different healthcare providers, different, you know, dental providers maybe. So the fact that you have to download forms from different systems and then pre-populate those forms with some basic data so that you can save the time of the employee, that is a very, very good example for RPA. Typically would take like, you know, an hour or half an hour for a human for each employee. You can cut it down in seconds.
That depends. Which I'll share more of my experience when I used with this one. And I'm also technical, and I'll discuss it later. First impressions and findings. Not everything can be easily replaced. Not everything can be replaced easily without hacking around. What do I mean by that? So I tried the UiPath, and it's quite hard to deal with dynamic stuff. So for example, I have a data table and I don't have a pagination. I only have a scroller, and I have a simple viewport there. How would I automate something and say, find me a record in this 300 row? Dealing with dynamic stuff is it's very painful for me. I'd rather code it and like through the API. But again, I guess that's not a RPA solution because Why don't you just deal with it through the API and API? Handling processes that has a lot of edge cases is hard to develop in the beginning because what you would see later on is like you have a workflow or canvas and you have to do like a flow chart thingy where if it's a complex business process, you have a lot of like if else there and what happens to the maintenance once it's deployed. It's just like very painful, I think. And so the next one is very prone to breaking changes because obviously once the UI changes, everything breaks. And I'm like, how do you do automated testing or testing in an RPA stuff? I have no clue because it's already going through the API or through the presentation layer. Maybe they have a framework out there. I haven't gotten through the testing part, but it's really, really hard. And some, like Rajiv was saying earlier, is like, it took like 1 hour or and a half. So one example that I tried to automate was like, all right, let's come up with a simple use case, which is repetitive. I'm gonna automate my timesheet every day at 5 p.m., right? It was so hard that it took me like more than an hour to just actually automate it. Did it actually save me time in the future? Maybe. Was it beneficial to me? Maybe, because once I have a different charge code, now I have to update my UI path and say, oh, if charge code, but I'm like, how do I detect when does my charge code change, right? Right now it's easy because I'm only charging in one charge code. But once those complex business rules are in place, then it's really hard to like come up with an RPA solution for that.
The timesheet use case is not a good example.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and we don't recommend it. We do have a demo of it, I think. So if you come asking for the code, you won't get it. But what I think Leo was also trying to allude to was that trying to overcome some of the complexity in the UI that is inherent to those applications, right? So they may be Web 1.0 UI that may not be the most well crafted, and there's only so much you can overcome, right? And so there is a risk involved. When you're developing RPAs, there's a lot of risk involved in the longevity of the tool that you're creating. That RPA may not survive very long. So that's something that have to be taken into consideration in your return on investment analysis. Is this RPA bot or that automation agent will survive for a long time? Is the UI that the application is promoting, is that going to change within the year? So all of that can impact the return on investment and your decision making, whether that should be automated or not.
Yeah. And you have to be careful too once you go the RPA approach, because once you pick a vendor, you're locked in. So there's not like reusable components where you can switch from Blue Prism and then migrate it to UiPath. So if, say, you've deployed a UiPath solution, and then now you say, oh, I want to change because I don't like this vendor. Now you have to rewrite, I think, the entire RPA solution to Blue Prism. So that's one caveat.
How about Microsoft Flow?
Microsoft Flow, it's not an actual RPA thing. It's just like automating scripts. So with Microsoft Flow, I would assume you would automate like within the Microsoft ecosystem. And then they have some third parties such as like Google and stuff. But I guess you really have no choice. You're already locked in Microsoft in the first place.
Well, at least, so.
Separate license?
No, I believe it's included in Office 365.
They may have separate line items in the 365 licensing subscription. So they may have, I don't recall, I think most basic 365 subscriptions will include Flow and Power Apps. But there might be some additional fee because the 365 ecosystem is growing rapidly, and they may start considering like, this is the professional edition and this is the business enterprise edition. They may start charging some additional fees, but still there's no risk of Microsoft being acquired by somebody else, I think. There is, or at least the risk is less compared to UiPath and Blue Prism being acquired and merged with other companies. RPA field is still new, and so there isn't a lot of open source or mature open source frameworks yet. for the RPA ecosystem. And choosing a vendor like UiPath or Blue Prism or any of those vendors, there is an inherent risk involved that they could get acquired, and that technology can I don't know, can be folded into the company that is acquiring it and could impact your RPA agent. So that is another risk to be considered, and it's actually an active topic of discussion in the industry, how to cope with mergers and acquisition with RPA vendors when you've invested in one.
And then one of the limitation of most enterprise products are like, it only supports Windows. So if you have a Macintosh or like Linux, it's not gonna work most likely because they targeted Windows platform.